There it is.
Welcome. With a few technical delays, which is not unfamiliar to me. For example, 2 weeks ago, in another presentation, I had a rare Zoom outage. Imagine this area of the country went blank on Zoom. So I am used to those challenges, but today I hope only these minor ones will greet us. Welcome to my 2-day presentation on igniting the power of your anger for positive change. And I will mostly be on behind my slides, and I will be the speaker here. So I will mostly be on the screen somewhere. There we go. Your official welcome. As I reminded earlier arrivals, if you grab a sheet of paper and pen, notebook to journal in, there will be a few opportunities to do some self-reflection. So I see Jennifer has joined us. Jennifer, welcome. Please say hello, your name, and where you're from. Now, we just began. Mute your microphone unless you're asking a question. You can ask it in the chat, and if I don't see it, Doug will let me know. Um, and the other is if you raise your hand, we will notice you and unmute you so you can ask your question. So to begin, I want to ground. I want to help create a safe place here so that we can feel connected. And the grounding I want to use is for you to close your eyes, get in your body, and imagine the soles of your feet sending energy down through the ground to the center of the earth. Grounded in that way. And then imagining from your tailbone straight up the middle of your spine, up the crown of your head, connecting to the sun and all that the sun represents. The sun represents the possibility of life on earth. If we didn't have the sun, there would be no life. So that's the connection. And feel the strength in your body with this. Take a deep breath and exhale. I included a quotation by Rumi: wear gratitude like a cloak, and it will feed every corner of your life. Because right now, I am grateful to be here, to have you with me. That's my official picture. And I want to present a short bio, and it is this. In 1982, I received my PhD in clinical psychology. Since that point, I have worked with clients for over 40 years. And in that time, I didn't realize that I knew what I knew from my training and did the best I could in interacting with my clients, helping them clarify the situation, offer suggestions, and so forth. But truly, I was lost because in my own personal journey, I I didn't have the answers on how to move forward in life. So I'm now bleeding my official bio, but I'll finish that up. 10 years ago, I started to write a chapter, and very, very unusual for me. I heard the words, listen to the cries of your heart. That began my personal journey to heal my heart. 5 years later, intuition provided me the instructions to become a MAP practitioner. MAP, make anything possible, so that I deepen and made more effective the work that I could do with my clients. All of this, the details I will share with you over the next 2 days. Now, the real story behind the bio is this. When I was in healing school at the Barbara Bredden Institute over 20 years ago, one of the first exercises we did was to sit in pairs with a healer, and we were guided to the place of our birth, the time of our birth, so that when we opened our eyes, we looked into the eyes of the healer, now our mother. And here I was anticipating, joy and excitement that I was there. But instead, I saw a deadness. I didn't realize that initial experience made me feel very alone because there was no mother there. She was withdrawn. And as I later learned the story of her life, I knew why she withdrew. Life had disappointed her in such a deep way that she withdrew. So I learned the pattern of withdrawal. So I felt lost and confused. Most of my life, really. I did the best I could in terms of grasping the rules, guidance from what I could see out there. And as it turned out, I became a conformist. I conformed the best I could in school, be the best student, etc., etc. Got my bachelor's degree in philosophy because my aunt had told me when I was 8 that I had no personality, no looks to go forward. Her daughter had looks, so she knew about that. But she said I had my brains to use that. So I used my intellect from that point forward. For decades and decades, conforming, using my intellect to get my degree and to practice. And it was when intuition broke through that I was able to explore in a different way. And that difference has created such a transformation in me that I hope you hear that I'm speaking from my heart. I hope you hear that I feel so connected to the greater being that I'm being used as a channel to say what I need to say today and tomorrow that will touch you so that you will see more and get connected to your heart and your soul and your wisdom so that you can feel clear with purpose and at peace. That's the bigger picture. So this is the quick structure. I try to create a safe and a sacred place by bringing gratitude and bringing in grounding. I introduced myself in the way I could, and my support team, my partner, will keep noticing in the chat because I can't pay attention to too many things at once. What we are going to be doing over the next 3 days is I will do some teaching, but equally, there will be opportunities for you to self-reflect and to share. And that's the beauty of the connections that we can have in this group. When you share, um, your yes is in the chat, which we'll come to, and what you got out of your self-reflection. If you can share in the chat or even raise your hand and share in person. So this is how we will work over the next 2 days. So it's just not me talking. Day one, it's becoming aware of your anger, how your history is behind how you regard anger, and how this attitude affects who you are. The picture on the left is, I love that picture because it looks so much like me as a three-year-old. One of my pivotal moments in my growing up, my fraternal grand, no, yeah, my father's mother lived with us, as is in Japanese culture. I overheard her saying to my mother, she, meaning me, is a habutembo. You see that pouting? That's what a habutembo is in Japanese. I couldn't express my anger verbally, but I certainly could wear it in my face. And this is what I did for so long, hiding my anger. And you'll learn more about what you've done with anger. But that's my picture of how that attitude and how I hid my anger informed decades of my life. Day two, we will look at your anger and inner child wounds. You see, that criticism I heard from my grandmother was a wound that I took in that I had to hide. I had to hide my anger. There are similar episodes, others that I will share with you, and you will discover for yourself today. So tomorrow, we'll discover a different way of being with your anger, listening to its message. Begin to own the power of your no, so you can own your truth and align with your heart. And what I will share with you in releasing or healing childhood wounds will empower you, not only to have your no, but to be able to speak your on truth. And when you begin to do that and align with your heart, you'll have such clarity. You'll come to peace. You'll come to seeing that in your heart, you can touch your wisdom and your original essence, your spirit, the gifts you came with, so you can embrace the purpose for being in this lifetime. Harriet Lerner is a psychologist I discovered ages ago. Here's a quotation from you. I love to share a wisdom quotation because my attitude is this: I am here to help you to get into a space so you can remember your wisdom. And that is what the whole intent is for over the 2 days, to remember your wisdom, to say enough so you can say, oh yeah, I can see that. Oh, I know that's true. So Harriet Lerner says, anger is a tool for change when it challenges us to become more an expert on the self and less of an expert on others. As you will see later today, one of the patterns we can often adopt when we deny our anger is we concentrate on what is happening to the other. This is a spoiler, disclosure, we become people pleasers, looking to see how we can meet the needs of others so we can get their approval and their love. And while all of that happens, we cannot have our anger. So the point of this time together is to begin to see that anger is a tool for change, to become more an expert of you. So the first self-reflective exercise is to consider, what are you taught? What were you taught when you were growing up? I want to pause here because I realized I didn't do any yes in the chat. And I want to do that before we get into this. So I will stop the share and have you be in a place of saying yes in the chat, okay? Say yes in the chat if you want positive change in your life, that's what attracted you. Good, we're getting yeses. Say a yes in the chat if, like me, you have felt lost and confused. Thank you. Thank you. Say yes in the chat if you desire a sense of soul purpose, life purpose, so you can feel directed by that purpose. Say yes in the chat. Thank you. Yes, I like that 3 exclamation point. Thank you. Say yes in the chat if you wish things were clear to you. And I hope that this is what you will gain today. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Finally, say less yes in the chat if you want less turmoil, less struggling, and more peace. Thank you for your responses. You see, I get so inspired by my script that I forget to, my slides, I forget to pay attention to my slides, my script, I mean. So now I'm going back to sharing the screen. So this is the first exercise for you to think about what you were taught about anger growing up. Were you discouraged from being angry by being told, be nice, don't be so emotional? Good girls, good boys aren't angry. What other things might you have heard? You also may have seen very angry parents, and that was ugly. The pain, the conflict, the struggles, you wanted to get away from them. So much anger. So you were taught by example, I don't want to be that way because anger hurts. I can see it. And then if a parent, especially the father, in his angry moments made you the target and physically hit you for no good reason except he was angry and you happened to be there, or you said something that displeased him, so you were abused. So share in the chat. No, reflect. Write in your notebook, in your journal. What were you taught about anger? And I'll give you a minute or two to reflect. All right. So raise your hand if you're willing to share what you found in reflecting your history growing up in your family about anger. Doug and Mary shared. Mary, be good. Never let them see you sweat. Only stupid girls cry and talk. Doug, no room for my personal anger. My father owned all the anger in my house. Sharon, I was told I was like my anger who had father who had anger issues. Wow, that's a hard one to swallow. Anyone else want to share? When I did my personal history in terms of healing my heart, I remember 3 times early in my life that I saw my father angry. And he threw things when he was angry, happily, not at us. One example was that I was working on a project in the living room and I had India ink, indelible India ink. He said to me, be careful, because I was working on a table that had wool rug in it, a new wool rug. And would you know, I spilled the bottle and the ink got on the floor. He picked up that ink bottle and threw it across the room. That was one of 3 times I saw my father angry. And at the time, I was not fazed by it. I just took it in because already I had learned to suppress my anger. So when you had the history that you're describing about not being angry and all of that, what did you do with your anger? So now I'm going to go back to the sharing and see what I have next.
And there's some other comments
Oh,
in
please.
the chat.
Yeah.
Nanny said she stayed silent.
Yes.
Allison said, I didn't express anger, but watched my mother express it through shouting and getting what she wanted.
Ah, okay. Thank
And
you.
Danny said, let me scroll up. For some reason, my scrolling up's not working well. Danny said something to the effect that she was taught that anger was an optimal way of attending to her needs.
Ah, well, we need to hear more from you, Danny, as we move into this presentation. So, we are at this point of say a yes in the chat is if when you're angry or someone is angry, whether it makes you uncomfortable. Yes. Okay. Thank you. How comfortable are you with your own anger? Let's see, say yes in the chat if you are uncomfortable with your own anger. Make it easy. Yes in the chat if you are uncomfortable with your own anger. Yeah,
Not lots of yeses.
yes. And I see Nanny says that she feels she's losing control. Okay, wonderful. So one of the ways that we might react is we might fight back, we may flee, we may freeze. And that is a response that is important to what I mean by freeze, is that you can live with a PTSD system in your body, nervous system, that you've been so traumatized by anger that you can either fight, flee, or freeze. And when you do any of those things, you're not present. You're not responding, you're just reacting. Thank you, Mary, about this justifiable rage for years. We will talk about what you can do about owning that anger and how to make it work on your behalf. Thank you for that. Okay, here are ways in which you might avoid anger. You suppress. I suppress. I know that. I'm learning not to suppress because I know that my anger is healthy. Conflict avoidance. Conflicts about people not agreeing, and there's defensiveness and aggression. And that's scary if you don't know how to be comfortable with anger. So you avoid conflict. You avoid situations there could be conflict. You avoid relationships where you could be in conflict. Welcome, Gloria. Please say where you're from, your name. We're in the middle of having gone through our history around anger and our what we learned in our families about how anger is handled and more exactly how we were told. So I am now beginning a list of patterns to avoid anger. Suppression. I know that well. I just bury it, deny it. Second, I want to avoid situation where there is conflict. And by the way, as I do this, say yes in the chat if you feel that you suppress your anger and deny it. Say yes in the chat if you avoid conflict. So you don't want to be in a situation where you speak up. Because if you don't agree, somebody might disagree with you, and there you have a conflict. Say yes in the chat if you know people pleasing, where you look at yourself and you realize you want to be nice, polite, so that people will accept you, won't reject you. And if you have anger, you have to stuff it because you're in this people-pleasing pattern, which takes over how you live with others, at home, and at work. Say yes in the chat if you know people-pleasing. Say yes in the chat if you stay or know self-blame. You see, anger has a certain energy, and when it's not acknowledged and accepted, it's just churning in your inner world. And guess who's a good target? You.
Yes.
So if there's anything going wrong, you blame yourself. So you say yes in the chat if you know self-blame. I have a client now who is very strongly battling to not accept responsibility for everything that goes wrong. And she's trying to see that she actually is wise and can see what people are doing. But because she was abused so early in her life, she's turned this anger, who can't say, you can't do that. I'm not going to go along with that. And it's turned to self-blame that she's finally acknowledging. Why am I accepting responsibility for all this nonsense? She was blaming herself. So to summarize on this, where anger has nowhere to go, if you don't see that it is because someone is not respecting your needs or a situation isn't respecting what you need, it ends up you're being the victim. So the next is, are you overly accommodating? Can you say yes in the chat if you feel like you accommodate people? You go along with them. You don't say what you want. You just let them have their way. Say yes in the chat if you numb out. If you kind of dissociate and not even there when potentially you're angry or someone else is. Say yes in the chat if you know how to shut down. Just kind of become a stone, become unresponsive to what is happening in front of you. Or shutting down in terms of internally removing yourself from the situation. Whenever you think, I'm out of here, or you think, I want to run away, this is an indication that you're shutting down. Say yes in the chat if you know what perfectionism is. Perfectionism is this constant drive, conscious or not, to keep pushing yourself, to make things better, to make yourself better. The bar is set high. You have to be perfect. And until you recognize that this is what it is, you're trying to be perfect because you maybe at a deeper level believe unless you're perfect, you're never going to get the love you want, never get the approval you want, never get people to accept and love you. So this perfectionism drives you. So will anyone admit, yes, in the chat, I know what this perfectionism is. Perfectionism means as hard as you work, whatever you produce, you're not satisfied. Perfectionism also means you have a negative critic, always criticizing you and always criticizing others. Put a yes in the chat if you think you may be passive aggressive. Now, I say if you think you may be passive aggressive, because psychologically, this means that your anger has become so unconscious that your aggressiveness shows up in other ways, and people are responding to you as if you were aggressive, but you're consciously not, but you were passively aggressive. So this is why these are the patterns that may arise when you avoid anger. So say yes in the chat, or even write a number of how many of these you're willing to own at this time. So are we getting some numbers? I see that we are.
Lots of yeses.
Good. Thank you.
Danny saying 4, Gloria saying all of it. Mary saying her aggression is apparent.
Okay.
She also said earlier that she seeks out situations where there is conflict.
Ah. Okay. Now, I want to, you have reflected and recognized these patterns. And you can see now more clearly, hopefully, spending time on these questions and how people have shared, that you can see how anger shows up in your life. Now, I want to move you forward. What are the consequences of anger? The first one is, as I mentioned, self-blame, which is actually self-rejection. When it's not recognized, anger, or accepted, it turns inward. For example, Maria's boss dismisses her ideas in meetings. Instead of feeling her anger and speaking up, she says, maybe I'm not good enough. She spirals into self-doubt and shame and self-rejection. Another consequence. Say yes in the chat if this sounds familiar to you. Self-blame and self-rejection. We're getting some response. Yes, excellent.
And Gloria had mentioned that I think this applies to consequences that you end up hurting others.
Right. Um, thank you. I may not have. Well, that's the passive aggressiveness and any kind of aggression of anger that you have no control over. You react. It is a consequence. And thank you for naming it, Gloria. All of this is for you to recognize the whole feel of anger as I am leading you to, so you can fully see why it's important to understand how anger, the power of it, can be used on your behalf. Okay? So the second, loss of boundaries. This is when you don't hear that anger is your heart's no to a person or situation who is not respecting your needs for safety, for respect, safety, respect, care, and love. So the example is James agrees to help a friend move, even though he's exhausted and has a work deadline. Instead, he feels, uh-oh. Oh, anyway, he feels resentment growing, but he smiles and says, sure, no problem. This is where he lost his boundaries of drawing and saying, I have needs, but no, he is paying attention to the needs of a friend. Boy, say a yes in the chat. When you said yes instead of no, because you didn't have strong enough boundaries to take care of yourself. Say yes in the chat. Yes. Thank you for your honesty and your acknowledgement. The next, chronic resentment. This is when unfelt or unexpressed anger festers. Over time, the suppressed anger leads to bitterness. I lost my place, sorry. Bitterness, passive aggressive behavior, or sudden explosive reactions. So this may be what I can't remember. Was it Gloria?
Gloria.
Yeah,
Gloria.
what Gloria said. Yes. For example, Lisa never speaks up about her partner's constant lateness. One day, over something small, she erupts in rage, surprising them both. And that's how it is. It erupts, and it's such a small thing, but it's because all of this is built up. So, how many of you, even in small ways, have suddenly exploded in anger, surprising you? Say yes in the chat if you know this one.
Allison says yes, definitely. Danny says yes.
Oh, all right. And I appreciate you admitting this because it means we're in the right classroom together here for what I am sharing today, especially tomorrow. More consequences. Misalignment with purpose. Anger often signals what is important, where your boundaries, values, and soul path are calling. But when you ignore it, it leads to you being confused, drifting, staying stuck in unfulfilling jobs, relationships, or roles. I particularly see clients who have stayed in marriages, like one client, for 25, 30 years until she did enough work and she said, why am I doing this? He's a narcissist and I have no space. So she had the strength to leave because she was no longer confused and being stuck. Another example is Sophia stays in a draining job year after year. She feels restless and tired, but tells herself, it's fine. Other people have it worse. She no longer hears the anger urging her to honor her deeper dreams. So, how many of you can admit to feeling not aligned with purpose, lacking clarity and direction? Say yes in the chat if you see this. Thank you for your yeses to say we're in the same classroom. Finally, emotional disconnection from self and others. When you push anger away, it cuts you off from your heart, from your emotional life. And as a psychologist, I know you cannot just put a damper pedal on one emotion and not put a damper pedal on the whole range in the keyboard. When you dampen any negative emotion, you dampen all emotion. Consequently, you're emotionally flat. You feel no joy, no passion, no connection. The love that you feel doesn't feel deep. You feel alone, lonely, not really connected with others and with yourself. Say a yes in the chat if you kind of can own to the disconnection from your heart, yourself, and your disconnection from others. Thank you for your yeses.
Nanny says it makes her feel like an imposter when
Absolutely.
when she disconnects.
Yes. The imposter syndrome is also one of the patterns that come from that disconnection. Thank you for naming it. So, the summary of this section: unacknowledged anger doesn't disappear, it becomes sadness, resentment, disconnection, or a life half lived. Because I was disconnected with anger for most of my life, when I read this and say a life half lived, I can feel the truth of that. I mean, decades and decades living on the surface, pretending I was okay, and underneath, lost, confused, and not realizing that I was living only half a life. Oh no, I know what I wanted to say. What it was for me was I was living with a broken heart for most of my life, and I didn't know it. And I will share you a time when I actually was angry. 6 years into my first marriage, my husband told me that he was declaring a marriage to be an open marriage, which justified his sleeping with others. A student. And I became angry for 24 hours. I was so angry that he was trying to contain me and I was just beating him up, beating his chest. And then he said to me, "You're not being rational." I don't know whether I've mentioned, but I lived with intellect most of my life. And being I don't know what my I'm here. I may as well say it. Being a debater under him, that just triggered it out of my heart into my brain. And I just turned off my anger. And what that did was cause me to disappear. And I need to share. Uh-oh. Hang on a second. I can't share because I don't have the correct screen up. Give me a minute to find my slides.
One of the things that I noticed as a result of being a physician for so many years was how anger would manifest as diseases in people.
Good, talk about it. What?
Well, the first example is that it really is very clear in my mind is people with migraines often what would precede a migraine for some people, not all people, but some people would be an episode where they were angry. We've also encountered people who were angry who had chronic digestive complaints or he couldn't find a physical cause for them. People with chronic pain sometimes have often a history of not only suppressed anger, but a history of abuse that might have engendered anger. And those are more subterranean, harder to access manifestation of anger.
Yes, and that reminds me, taking a holistic view of ourselves when we don't acknowledge and deal with anger, our life half lived not only emotionally but physically. I learned as a healer that the body is the last to express any conflicts that you have in the spirit level, in the cognitive level, the emotional level, energetic level, any of that. So that if you have a quarrel with that you don't acknowledge, or you have conflict with your heart that you don't acknowledge, patterns in your life that don't fulfill you and create a lot of stress. You have autoimmune diseases, right, Doug? That's another way it shows up.
That's a possibility for some people.
Yeah.
I mean, these things exist on a physical realm. I'm not trying to diminish them, but they often have some of their causes rooted in emotional conflicts and struggles.
Thank you, Allison, for finding your way back. I am at the point of having finished my story about how after I had my anger for 24 hours, I disappeared because I had to be rational, moving to my head, abandoning my heart. And since that time, lived without my heart informing me. And that is why I'm presenting an anger, because it is such a powerful way to connect with your heart again, which has great wisdom, which has your life purpose and your connection to spirit, all that which we'll talk about tomorrow in greater detail. Okay. We're at this point where if you can write in the chat or speak out loud any questions you've had. I've been going at it, Zoom permitting, for about 50 minutes. And to review, we went through your history, your family history with anger, to learn how the examples around you and what you were told caused you to deal with anger in a certain way, to push back, bury, not acknowledge. In any case, anger was not anything pretty, and it was uncomfortable to witness and to have inside. And we looked at that in various ways. And we looked at how patterns of dealing with anger leads to consequences that make you feel you're living not a full life, with confusion. I describe myself as, from the very beginning, not having a mother really present, feeling lost and confused, my heart broken most of my life until I began to heal my heart. So anger was for me my last real tool. Well, there's another one that we'll talk about tomorrow that helped me begin to know my heart, know my needs, know my longings, come back to myself. So, any questions? Whoops, I lost my, there it is. Are there any questions in the chat, or raise your hand, or you want to share an experience? Do you see anger somewhat differently now? Do you have hope that you will learn more about anger to feel empowered? Any responses like that? Please.
Nanny says, I used to tell my husband that I would feel a sudden sadness, like my heart was breaking. I recently started feeling this way again. Now I think this is my anger.
Ah, very good. I'm glad you got to that point of recognizing that so much of shutting down, being distressed, feeling powerless and helpless. How many times in a day, how often do you feel like you've got everything out of control, in control, and then you're not, feeling helpless, powerless? That is a sign that you could be really angry. You know, you could just stomp around going, shit, I hate this, hate the anger, acknowledging that you don't like this. This doesn't meet your needs, etc. So thank you for that share. Anybody else with a question or a takeaway from today's exercise?
Danny says, I too feel I have been living most of my life with a broken heart. I now realize I need to learn how to communicate my needs without shame.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And hopefully tomorrow, as I go through the empowering aspects of anger and how you can shift about anger, you will begin to get some support and resources for that. Anyone else with a question or a decision or a commitment? Day 2, we will talk about embracing your anger for the message of no from your heart. We will talk about drawing healthy boundaries. We will talk about how all of that gives you the safety to speak your truth, to know your truth. And all this is about choosing clarity, balance, and purpose. I moved back to the place of gratitude and what Rumi said, cloaking myself in gratitude. As I shared at the beginning of this presentation, Doug and I were the only one present, and I thought, oh my goodness, after all this effort, I can't share all this and spend the time with people to explore this topic. So thank you, thank you, thank you for showing up And for those of you who have missed portions of this, in the next hour, I will get the recording of this and send it through Eventbrite with the link for you to replay anything that you wish to review or that you missed. So tomorrow, bring your curiosity and your heart's desire to know, and have a wonderful 23 hours in between. Thank you. So I need to stop my recording.